Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Patrons video today that I make for Paul7931 as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves an album on the screen from an act named Zuriaake titled Guyan, and it's this track that we're going to be reviewing is titled The Frontier, so we're going to listen through it from start till finish and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. Interesting foley immediately with the wind and the horses. And the sort of synthy choir stuff as a pad is kind of, it's fascinating as well. It's almost sort of low-key black metalish with the tone of it, but it's, you know, a lot slower. But I do think that the kind of swing to the kit, the combination of that with the consistent guitars on the sides, and it's the visceral vocal style are really enthralling. And you can switch into double kicks here as well. It's just nice to have the foley of the animals and stuff like that as well, you know, like, it's a brutal kind of texture, but it's still very meaningful. mean, it's a frenetic solo to be sure. I think because of how smooth the mix is, even when it comes into this kind of like really kind of raucous solo sections, it still sounds so constant, if that makes sense. Oh, tremolo bar. And there we go, we had the horses and we had the storm on the frontier going out like that. It's cool. I thought that this was a really interesting track. I'm not sure what it's about lyrically, but the music was very intriguing, and we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Zuriaake, titled The Frontier off of the Guyane album. You've got the album up in the corner there, but just also it's behind me now, so that's the point. So the album is there on the screen a bit bigger for you. So what do we think this track is about? I'm not sure. I get the impression with the horses and the birds and the storm that this could be like a battleground or like war or something like that. Could be angry spirits or something like that. Battles past fought and stuff like that. I get the impression that some really sort of terrible kind of messed up stuff's occurred. And so there's a sense of trepidation about it. The vocal style definitively assists that. It's very rough and harsh and gritty, but I kind of adore it. Because the last thing I want in a track where a lot of the components are so visceral is for the vocals to be super silky smooth. It seems a little bit sort of disparate is the word I was looking for. And I appreciate the fact that even though I could not understand the words that were being said, I think they may have also been in a different language. I'm not sure. I couldn't understand them, but regardless, it was partially because of the technique, but also how much they were sort of fading into the ether of the overall environment created from all the combination of different elements. It still communicated a fury and intensity there that I think if I had more of a focus listened specifically and only on the vocals, I'd probably be able to ascertain it. And I like that a lot, because often with metal vocals, a common criticism is that it's difficult to understand what the people are growling or shrieking. But honestly, half of what's so cool about it is the tone of that vocal performance, in the same way that it's not the lyrics that always make a performance, it's the quality of the singing. So I feel like the vocalist did tremendously well, even if I didn't get the words through. And I was really happy with the attention to detail in that regard. I thought it was great. The track at 6:45, with the understanding that the vocalist showed, it's really great technique doing that style. It's very difficult to do that style and not really hurt yourself, and it seemed like they're doing it in quite a healthy way, despite how kind of ghoulish it sounded. It was a track that predominantly featured, again, the sound of the animals and the storm sounds, but also had like sort of synthy choir pad things going on in the background, and it was guitars and bass and drums. And we had a range of different ways of approaching those different elements through it. I think it was through composed. I don't know. This definitely wasn't your typical 3.5 minute single with verses and choruses and a little interlude section all cutesy like that. No, this was a journey that you went through, and it was tough to listen to. It was confrontational. The chords on the guitars were, they were distorted, they were spicy, they were kind of they were kind of almost attacking. They were just they were fiery and they sizzled and they didn't try to play nice, and they were modulating minor triads, and it was potentially diminished at some point in regards to that formulation. I feel like doing those distorted bar chords wouldn't have necessarily been particularly palatable, but I think when you put everything else together, it makes sense within the style, which is why I initially gave it a sort of a kind of a black metal-ish kind of attribution, because it kind of sounded like might go like that. But later on, we had these really interesting guitar solos there that were chaotic and wild and crazy, and they were dispersed several positions throughout the track, and I feel like they weren't there to be an alternate focal point. They were more a dash of flavor in the mire. And I enjoy the fact that we are trying to make the guitar less of a voice in a sense and make it more of a kind of like a bit of kind of like salt in the wound or something along those lines. I enjoyed that we tried to do. I just realized I can do this. See how this is green screen? There's actually a green patch here. So it's like I'm touching nothing. Isn't that trippy? Sorry, I'm going to go back to being mildly professional now. Whether you had, again, the strum parts on the sides, which had a really kind of hideous nature to them. They were meant to be grotesque, but they also sounded really cool. Or you had the solos that were sort of like really interesting to listen to. You had the bass parts, which are typically supporting the root notes there, created a nice sort of solid foundation at the low end. And then you had the drums, which had a swing groove to them. Like had kick snares and cymbals. And there was some fills occasionally, but the main points for me for focus percussion wise were those kind of swing grooves where things kind of bounced around a little bit and had a sense of they're dancing around the consistency of those guitar parts with the chords and the harmonies. But then we also had like double kicks, and they were ferocious, and we had maybe even some blast beats occasionally. And it was stuff that made sense within the genre style music we were doing there, but I liked that it wasn't the same beat the entire time. I liked that we had variation there within the percussive parts, because it's a long time for one drum groove, you know what I mean? I appreciated the synth choir parts as well. I thought they were a nice layer in the mid to higher ranges there, when they were niched neatly. Just as a foil to the kind of the barren wasteland that was the composition of certain parts there. They're almost angelic and kind of scarily soothing, which was a kind of weird equilibrium to have texturally within the mix. But it was kind of pretty, and I think that you sometimes need that little bit of something sort of extra, or that little bit of change there to keep things intriguing, or keep things, especially if you're new to the genre, you kind of need something just kind of to hold on to that's a little bit less kind of aggressive. But I feel that nonetheless, when you combine all these different textures and timbres into a piece there, when you understand that the composition is intricate and is well fleshed out and is never too much of the same thing, when you sort of really focus on the fact that it is pretty well structured and fleshed out, and there's no filler, and as far as I'm concerned, it flies by despite the length. You've just got a theme there where it's just meant to sort of like, I think, explain what the horses are going through, the stormy weather, the frontier, the danger of that new expanse there. What sort of to warn you of what happens if you go beyond it, or into the frontier. It kind of is trying to describe what that area is like, and it's very exciting and makes you curious about it, even if you get a sense of foreboding from it's mainly minor key the entire time there. The solos are again chaotic there. The percussion is aggressive, so are the vocals. It's saying you don't want to mess with this too much. That's what the music told me about the track via the main theme of the song. I can imagine that probably everything kind of connects together quite well in that respect. But the studio recording, mixing, and mastering, it's the icing on the cake in that it's far from overdone. It's It gets rough around the edges. Things are leveled in a way where they're not trying to get everything individually. It's sort of just trying to be sort of glued together. The drum tones were kind of, they were not polished drum tones. They sounded like they was on a kit in a garage, and we were going for that almost sort of lo-fi aesthetic with it, but in a positive way. Where again, it's that kind of, if it's too clean sounding, it doesn't sound appropriate for the rest of the instruments. There's kind of this glitchy, kind of like ugly guitar tone there with the bass, and then the vocals sounding grotesque. And then you have, again, the synths kind of piled on there via the keys. And you have those combined in a track where even if it's kind of all kind of mired together, the Foley and everything else kind of sifts together in the spectrum and stereo field, you can still kind of, you can feel everything together, even if you can't necessarily sort of like separate them into the mix cleanly. It's loud without pumping. There's not a lot of dynamic range within this, but I don't think it really needed it. It was meant to be sort of like a overwhelming experience. It was nice and loud without pumping. Bus compression limit was handled, and effectively, this is just a really positive review of this track from an actor named Zuriaake, titled Guyan. Oh no, it's The Frontier. The album is Guyan. Sorry. And hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show Zuriaake some love via their various social medias and their Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next review or next SP Patrons video. Spiderhands out.